Will the House come to order? Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Alcos,
Excused.
Ms. Amato, Ms. Bellotti, Mr. Chun, Ms. Cochran, Mr. Evslin, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Garrett, Ms. Grandinetti, Mr. Hashem, Mr. Holt, Mr. Hussey, Ms. Ichiyama, Mr. Iligan, Ms. Iwamoto, Ms. Kahaloa, Ms. Capella, Ms. Kohokapu Liloy, Mr. Kila, Ms. Kitagawa, Mr. Kong, Mr. Kush, Ms. Lachika, Ms. Lamosao, Mr. Lee, Ms. Lowen, Ms. Martin, Mr. Matayoshi, Ms. Matsumoto, Mr. Miyake, Ms. Morikawa, Mr. Muraoka,
Excused.
Mr. Olds, Ms. Peruso, Mr. Pirik, Ms. Poe, Mr. Quinlan, Ms. Reyes Oda, Mr. Sayama, Mr. Shimizu, Ms. Souza, Mr. Takeyama, Ms. Takenouchi, Mr. Tam, Mr. Tarnas, Ms. Templo, Mr. Todd, Mr. Ward,
Excused.
Mr. Woodson, Mr. Yamashita, Madam Speaker.
Item number 2.
Madam
Oh,
Speaker,
here.
48 members are present, 3 are excused.
Item number 2, reading of the journal. Representative Morikawa.
Madam Speaker, may this matter be deferred.
So ordered. Item number 3, messages from the governor. Mr. Clerk, are there any messages from the governor?
Madam Speaker, there are none.
Item number 4, Senate communications. Mr. Clerk, are there any Senate communications?
Yes, Madam Speaker, we are in receipt of communications returning House concurrent resolutions numbers 1 and 2, both having been adopted in the Senate.
Introductions. Members, are there any introductions? Vice Speaker Linda Ichiyama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my pleasure to welcome our United States Congresswoman, Jill Tokuda, and former colleague, members of WICI, and welcome her to the House of Representatives. Thank you.
Representative Quinlan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today in the gallery, we have members from the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii celebrating their annual Chamber Weeks. Every January, our state chamber brings the community from business leaders, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and students to the Capitol to learn and engage in the legislative process. The Chamber's education and workforce development team works to streamline, upskill, and retain our local talent for our state's in-demand industries such as engineering, IT, healthcare, and more through work-based learning and sector partnerships. DOE high school students are here today as an opportunity to learn about the legislature, use their voice to advocate for causes they care deeply about, and to learn about the importance of civic engagement. This afternoon, between 1 and 2:30 p.m., the students will be visiting our offices for their high school Capitol walkaround to introduce their group and put their advocacy to the test. If you are available during that window, please let them know they are welcome as they walk around the Capitol. Chamber of Commerce Hawaii team, please stand and be recognized.
Representative Hashem.
Speaker, I would like to introduce 2 lovely guests from Okinawa. They are Duki Nagahara, please stand, and Namiki Tamayose. They are hosted by the Ginoza Shojin Kai, a local Okinawan organization whose members trace their roots to Ginoza village in Okinawa. Duki and Namiki they just finished touring South America, where they were hosted by the Ginoza clubs in Brazil, Peru, and Argentina. Duki Nakahara works for the Ginoza village government, and Namiki is an elementary school teacher in Okinawa. They are accompanied by David Shinsato. David, please stand. He's the president of the Hawaii Ginoza Sonjinkai. And Lisa Nakama, VP of Hawaii Ginoza Sonjinkai. Members, please give them a round of applause.
Any further introductions? Representative Templo.
Thank you, Speaker. Members and guests, it is my great honor to introduce my alma mater, Farrington High School, the home of the governors. Named after Governor Wallace Ryder Farrington, the sixth governor of the territory of Hawaii, and also a Honolulu mayor, our school has produced numerous individuals who achieved prominence in numerous fields. In government, we have Representative Greg Takayama, we have Senator Donna Mercado Kim, Senate Vice President Michelle Kandani, City Council Member Augie Toba, former Governor Ben Cayetano, and many more. Farrington's motto is enter to learn and go forth to serve. Today, we have 22 students, a part of Chambers Week, who did the urban forestry presentation this morning. Governors, as I call your name, please stand, and audience, please refrain from applauding till the end. We have Prince Adena, Angela Arana, Noah Arisgado, Bitnia Bifa, Joel Cabrales, Arabella Cruz, Lindsay Eugenio, Janika Ganao, Jaina Conman, Kay Mabang, Lynette Manuel, Raina Mine, Sheena Muniz, Clerk Pauting, Nadine Pascual, Queen Joy Pascual, Mark Reyes, Ariel Romero, Lekale Valerio, Kamakea Wright, Rain Young, Le Mamo Kianahi. Madam Speaker, may I have your permission to add their names onto the journal?
So ordered.
Farrington High School governors, welcome to your House of Representatives. Thank you.
Are there any further introductions? Representative Reyes-Oda.
Thank you, Speaker. Today we have 40 students and educators from James Campbell High School. Campbell is special since it allowed me the honor of teaching hundreds of its students in the first 5 years of my career. The students of Campbell High School presented this morning on bike and pedestrian safety in the Eva Beach community. Campbell is the largest school in the state with over 3,000 students, and we are lucky to have these motivated kids with their teachers here today. Campbell High School, I welcome you to the House of Representatives, and will you please stand and be recognized? Speaker, I yield.
Thank you. Are there any further introductions? Representative Chun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today in the gallery, members, we have 40 students from Waipahu High School as part of the Elevated Voices of the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii Chamber Week. This morning, they did a presentation on a revitalization and redevelopment project of the Bill Balfour Jr. Waipahu District Park. And I, along with the rest of the Waipahu delegation, look forward to assisting you with your project. Members, Marauders, would you please rise to be recognized? Welcome to your House of Representatives, and request to have their names inserted into the journal.
Ordered.
Thank you.
Are there any further introductions? Okay. To call recess, subject to the call of the chair. Item number 5, unfinished business. Representative Todd.
Madam Speaker, I move to adopt House Resolutions number 6 and 7.
Representative Morikawa.
Madam Speaker, I second the motion.
Any discussion on these items? Representative Belatti.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My apologies. These are a little bit new, and I just want to make sure I'm talking on House Resolution number 6, adopting the rules of the House of Representatives of the 33rd Legislature, including the rules for the Select Committee on Standards of Conduct. Madam Speaker,
Yes.
I rise with reservations to the proposed rules being adopted by this House today.
Please proceed.
Thank you. First, I do want to commend House leadership for the outreach process that was followed in crafting rules for this legislative session. That is different from what I have seen occur during previous legislative sessions. I also want to acknowledge and share my appreciation that there is a commitment to revisit those rules so that we can ensure we are acting in accordance with those constitutional mandates and requirements from Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure that are the authorities and foundational documents we are supposed to base our rules upon. The source of my reservations, Madam Speaker, are twofold. First, I am concerned by some of the proposed rule changes we do not see in the rules before us. As an initial matter, because these two proposed rule changes are nowhere in the public domain, may I request that these two proposed rule changes, change 27 and 23, be entered into the journal following my spoken remarks.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, with Rule Change 27, this is a rule that formalizes the process of the approval of written remarks into the journal. I was very supportive of this rule change regarding approval of written remarks because it proposes a more formal process that involves the committee of the journal, comprised of members instead of staff, that under past rules exists to deal with matters related to the journal. In my experience recently, involvement of staff in censoring remarks is both inappropriate and awkward for members. The process of approving written remarks should be retained by members who through our legislative practices are the only individuals who can typically regulate and censor the speech and conduct of other members. Madam Speaker, with respect to proposed rule change number 23, which would require the Finance Committee to provide the House financial plan and budget worksheets to all members and the public 48 hours before decision-making on the budget bill is conducted in Finance Committee, I was generally supportive of codifying this good budgeting practice of providing more information as it reflects the practice that we had adopted last year. The providing of the financial plan with sufficient time for members to examine could have alleviated, I believe, some of the problems and confusion around revenue and appropriation bills passed in the last legislative session. Governor Ige has publicly stated that as Ways and Means Chair, he routinely provided the financial plan to his members and that to his members so that members would be able to vote knowledgeably on budget and appropriation bills. If the proposal in this proposed rule is not appropriate, something that could be done is to require that these budget worksheets, the financial plan, be provided at least 48 hours before all members to vote on the budget bills for third reading. Finally, Madam Speaker, my other area of concern is with the proposed Rule 20 in the proposed rules before us. Madam Speaker, I was generally opposed to this rule change as it was being circulated and considered by many of our members because it specifically goes in the opposite direction of implementing the principles of transparency, the public's right to know, and potentially due process rights of members. Interim committees, such as legislative working groups, have typically abided by these notice and open requirements, meeting requirements. So as we move forward, because of the openness of this leadership to dialogue and collaboration, I do appreciate this opportunity to register my reservations and hope that we can move forward, both with the work on the rules, but more importantly, on the work that needs to get done once these rules are implemented. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Representative Todd?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support. And before I get into the meat of the proposed rule changes, I'd like to recognize the tremendous amount of time, work, and coordination it took from members and also key staff to put together what I believe is the most extensive update of the House rules, at least since I originally took office in 2017. But I reserve the right to be wrong. My memory is not what it used to be. A lot of time, and that work goes underappreciated. And I can say with certainty that I took it for granted during prior updates over the past handful of sessions. So to those who have done this work before us, including members still serving, please accept my belated thanks because I have new appreciation for it. Speaker, our House rules are a living document that must evolve to reflect the reality of our work here at the Capitol and the needs of our state. And I believe the proposed update meets that mandate. For my time here at the legislature, I have heard several times that testimony on measures should not be provided to the public in advance because it would lead to greater dysfunction in committee hearings. After hearing feedback from chairs, staff, and community members, House leadership has included for the first time the requirement that testimony be made available to the public at the same time as committee members, 2 hours in advance of hearing start times. In addition, language has been explicitly included in our draft rules that chairs will be encouraged to release testimony as soon as it becomes available. This proposed amendment allows for earlier access for interested community members and a more informed discussion during hearings. As this change is implemented, the hope is to continue to gather feedback and data from members and the public and assess and refine this practice over time to provide for maximum transparency and efficiency. We also know here that navigating the intricacies of state government can be a challenge, even for those of us who literally do it for a living. If we pass these updated rules, the House will maintain for the first time a public list of all individuals nominated or appointed by the Speaker, along with their terms of service. This transparency measure will help the public track this process and be aware of upcoming vacancies where they may express interest in. In the interest of having a more accurate record of our voting here in the House, the proposed House rules before us will no longer exclude any member voting no from future consideration for conference committee membership. This has long been an issue where members with significant concerns or opposition to a measure may feel obligated to vote yes or with reservations so that they can continue to have input as a bill progresses through the session. This change will better enable members to vote their conscience and provide for a more accurate voting record for our constituents. In addition to changing some long-standing practices for the sake of transparency, this body has also been tasked with answering emerging questions around technology and our new interconnectedness. Included in the proposed draft are new sections allowing for telework for legislative staff and a robust social media policy designed to strike a balance between free speech, decorum, and public participation. On a personal note, I am particularly excited about the House embracing telework as part of our ongoing efforts to be a more competitive and accommodating employer. In addition to these key transparency and modernization items, there were also several changes designed to codify some of our existing customs and practices to remove ambiguity from this document. Our work here is frequently complex, and it is important that it is easily digestible and clear when possible. The last item I'd like to highlight is one that did not make it into the draft due to some logistical issues, but that we will advance while we hopefully work out some of those kinks. The practice of introducing bills by request without attribution has been the subject of some conversation over the years. While rarely used, about to the tune of a dozen or so bills a year outside of larger package bills, the House leadership team believes that the public is owed greater clarity. So we will be maintaining a list available to the public of these bills and who they were introduced on behalf of, provided that for individual constituent requests, we will maintain the anonymity of our community members. This measure will remove a veil from future legislation that, while infrequently used, has led to some confusion. Ultimately, if we were all asked
Representative Matayoshi.
Madam Speaker, I yield my time.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Ultimately, if we were all asked individually to craft our own version of this guiding document, I am confident that we would arrive with 51 wildly divergent editions. For this, I ask for a bit of grace as our leadership team tries its best to navigate some uncharted waters. I am sure that in our first term of service to this body, we will learn and grow alongside you. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I am hopeful that this document will help us better serve the state, and I support its adoption. Thank you.
Representative Iwamoto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to this motion. I just learned that when I speak about House rules and the powers and responsibilities prescribed for various leadership positions therein, I should clarify that my statements are not meant to be a personally offensive, attack, malign, disparage any person alive in this chamber. So let me be clear, Madam Speaker, that I have no reason, I have not felt disparaged, I have not felt personally aggrieved by colleagues in this chamber. In fact, just the opposite is true. I have felt extremely welcome. I have been the recipient of generosity and grace. I will be making comments about the role of Vice Speaker, and I know it's difficult, but I hope my colleagues can separate the role of Vice Speaker described in the House rules from the very kind, generous, patient representative from Salt Lake. Our affection for the human being in front of us should not stifle a fair discussion of the abstract powers of the Vice Speaker that has been described in our House rules since 1959. House Rule 7 from the first legislative session of the state of Hawaii reads, "The Vice Speaker shall exercise all the duties and powers of the Speaker in his absence. The Vice Speaker shall consult and advise the Standing Committee of the House and assist in their work as an ex officio member without vote." This limitation on the powers of the role of Vice Speaker is so important that a majority of those sitting in this chamber right now voted in favor of stating this limitation twice in our current House rules. In fact, Rule 3 states in relevant part, the Vice Speaker shall consult with and advise the standing committees and assist them in their work as an ex officio member without vote. Then, to underscore this limitation, Rule 11, governing standing committees, states in relevant part, the Speaker and Vice Speaker shall be ex officio members of each committee without vote. Secondly, the social media policy crosses the line and violates constitutionally protected First Amendment free speech rights. The ability to censor speech outside this chamber will be challenged. The antidote for speech you do not like is not censorship, it is more speech. And we have an entire communication team to help us offer the public a balanced discussion or correct the record. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, are the cuts to House rules that take the House further into the dark, that cuts the public out of this process. Rule 20 is titled Open Committee Meetings. Open to whom? The public. Listen carefully to these following words from Rule 20. Every meeting of a committee of the House or of a committee composed of a member or members from the House and the Senate held for the purpose of making decisions on matters referred to the committee shall be open to the public. Madam Speaker, if you recognize these words, it's because they come from the Constitution of the state of Hawaii. That's Article 3, Section 12. And we all just took a vote, an oath to support and defend that Constitution.
Representative Cochran.
No, sorry, is this working? Okay, sorry. I'd like to yield my time.
Thank you. So ordered.
Rule 20 also states that every committee authorized and/or established under Part 3 of these rules shall be a committee of the House. Finally, Rule 19, which the title is Advisory Committee on Rules and Procedure, is one of those committees described in Part 3, and it enjoys this protection of transparency. Madam Speaker, you convened the Advisory Committee on Rules and Procedure via a memo dated December 31st, 2024, and I understand that it met at least once on January 2nd, and it received over 70 suggested rule changes from members of both parties. The Advisory Committee on Rules and Procedure produced the new rules that we're voting on today, and thank you for your work. It is my understanding that the meeting on January 2nd was not publicly noticed, nor was the committee open to the public. Democracy lives in the process. If we are just concerned with outcomes, then we should stand aside for a benevolent dictator using AI to write bills. I recently heard a colleague say that these House rules were just an internal document that describes how we treat each other. I offer a rebuttal to that. I conclude by allowing the rules to speak for themselves. The preface of the House rules in both the current and proposed versions states in relevant part, it is the policy of the House of Representatives, the #1 policy, by the way, to provide the general public with a meaningful opportunity to participate in the legislative process. It continues, public participation is a basic tenet of our democratic process. Public participation is vital to maintaining a check on the legislative process and legislative decisions. Because we cut out the public out of this process, and because these new rules will cut the public out of parts of the legislative process moving forward, I invite my colleagues to join me in voicing their oppositions or their reservations. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I referenced 2 documents that I would like to enter into the journal.
So ordered.
Thank you.
Representative Tarnas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the resolution, both resolutions.
Please proceed.
Thank you. As your chair of Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs, I have been involved very closely in the efforts to incorporate the recommendations from the Commission to improve standards of conduct, which was created by this body a couple of years ago. And we have made significant progress, both through passage of legislation as well as incorporation into the rules of a number of the recommendations from the Commission. And the work of your leadership team to present to us today these proposed rules for debate in public is one that I really appreciate, because you have done it through a consultative process that is really quite unprecedented in our history in the House. You reached out to all of the members asking for input, considered that input carefully and thoughtfully, and as a leadership team, you have come up with your recommendation that we see before us today, and we are considering and making the decision about that in public, and we are having debate about it. And I think that's really what we want to achieve. We have done a lot to improve transparency in our process. And I think these rules, as you propose, are ones that further that and provide greater transparency for our process. We're trying to rebuild public trust in our institution. And I think your proposed rules do just that. And I support them, and I urge all members of the House to vote in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Quinlan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to address the issue that was raised about the Vice Speaker, which I think we've actually addressed quite a bit already. I will reiterate myself that there is nothing in our rules that prohibits the Vice Speaker from serving as a member of a
Excuse me, in support?
I'm
or-
sorry, in strong support.
Thank you.
There's nothing in our rules that prohibits the Vice Speaker from serving as a member of a standing committee. And this change in our rules reflects the past practice. In fact, the last 3 Vice Speakers have all served as members of committees and voted. It is an archaic provision, yes, from the year 1959, before the advent of closed-circuit television, before our proceedings were televised on YouTube, where it would be potentially necessary for the Vice Speaker in their role to physically walk down to a committee hearing, sit at the table, and as an ex officio member, be allowed to ask questions. I hope, Madam Speaker, that some things have changed since 1959 and we can update our rules for 2025.
Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support with reservations. I want to first of all thank the majority leadership for working with the minority in coming to a place where we are witnessing significant changes, positive changes within our House rules. And so I definitely support those changes. My reservation stems from the changes in Rule 30, Section 2, in regards to invocations. I want to thank the majority for preserving invocations here on the floor, for keeping the word invocation instead of replacing it with a moment of contemplation. However, Madam Speaker, throughout the history of our nation, the act of opening official deliberations with prayer, invocations, has been a deeply patriotic tradition. From the Continental Congress, which began each session with prayer, to President George Washington kneeling in prayer at Valley Forge, our leaders have recognized the need to invoke the presence of God when facing monumental decisions. Ben Franklin himself, during the Constitutional Convention, called on his colleagues to turn to the Father of Lights for wisdom when their debates reached an impasse. These moments of prayer were not mere formality. They were acts of humility, acknowledging that our wisdom is limited and that we require a higher guidance in the service of our people. Here in Hawaii, our cultural and spiritual heritage echoes this same truth. Our ali'i, our Hawaiian monarchs, were deeply grounded in faith. They recognized the significance of calling on Keokua, Almighty God, for wisdom and favor as they led their people. The Queen, whose legacy we honor with reverence, composed hymns and prayers during some of the most challenging and difficult times of her life, seeking divine strength for herself and her lahui. King Kamehameha III famously declared, which is on our state seal today, "Ua mau ke eo o ka aina I ka pono," the life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. Words that are rooted in a recognition of spiritual alignment with what is right and just. Madam Speaker, this legacy of faith is not one we should take lightly. Invocations are not a distraction or an addition to our official business. They are a cornerstone of how we begin it. They remind us of our responsibility, our kuleana, not just to serve the interests of the moment, but to uphold the values and principles that guide our decisions for the greater good. By removing invocations from the official order of the day, by not placing it on the agenda, we risk diminishing the importance and the message they convey. That we do not lead alone, but with the guidance of something greater than ourselves. So I summarize these remarks, and I'm very thankful for the significant positive changes in these House rules. I look forward to working with the majority as we progress this session, but wanted to note my reservations for the change in the role and place of invocations. Mahalo.
Thank you. Representative Kila.
Mahalo, Madam Speaker. I rise in support. Madam Speaker, the majority here have taken on the challenge of leading and revising the House rules. With the addition of Part 14, we now add a social media policy that was not ever inherited by any past chambers or legislatures. Madam Speaker, in the social media policy, it is modeled after what has been installed by our congressional legislature in Washington, D.C. We're embracing social media, Madam Speaker. Social media has been the platform for all of us here in this chamber to communicate and talk to our constituents, but it is a valuable tool that must be of preservation and concern. When I make social media posts, Madam Speaker, I have the chance to work with my constituents and some local businesses inside my community. But as we learned, there's often a perception of bias or favoritism. So I even go further at times to provide a disclaimer on post to remind folks that I'm not endorsing or advocating for a business and organization in my official state capacity. So when we are adopting our social media policy with the rules today, it allows us to move forward in making sure that we can preserve communication, but also make sure people know we are moving forward and adopting this. I also want to talk about, as we mentioned the Constitution, as mentioned on the floor, I want to remind colleagues that we also have the Constitution to uphold. In part, we have Article 12 with Hawaiian Affairs. Madam Speaker, I hope the energy that we have discussed this evening, today on the floor, can also be installed in some of the other parts of our Constitution. In Section 1, we have the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. In Section 5, we have the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. All of these matters are just as much important with the House rules we adopt today. It is a privilege if folks' constituents can mention the concern of the rules. But when I talk to my constituents, Madam Speaker, I think they expect us to do what is right. Because when I have constituents on the west side of Oahu, they're not asking me how we're governing ourselves. They're asking me how we're going to move forward to address some of the largest concerns. In the interim of 2024, West Oahu is plagued with many instances of violence. And it is this chamber and both parties that are working towards advancing and listening to our communities, such as adopting legislation to expand or clarify stand your ground laws. When we adopt our rules today, it is also the process to allow us to commence business, because we have 60 calendar days here in the legislature, but it's not what we just do here at the Capitol from January through May, because from May to December, we still have the opportunity and uphold the privilege of serving our constituents. So when we adopt our rules today, it allows us to continue the conversations for my Auntie Julie Kirkland, who is one of the residents in Nanakuli Hawaiian Homestead that is concerned about how are we going to work with them to move forward as we have on the table the successful conversion. It is for my constituents in Maili that are concerned as crime grows, how are we going to address it this session? So when we look at the rules as we adopt them today, it is not just the debate that we have before us, but it allows us to get to work for the people of Hawaii. So for those reasons, I rise in support.
Any further discussion? Representative Amato.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with reservations. I want to preface my comments with gratitude for the members for their work on this set of rules and for leadership. I know the amount of time that has gone into this and the careful consideration. However, I rise with reservations. I have concerns with one rule that I hope this body will consider in a broader context than just today's vote. I had requested change to Section 20.2 of the House Administrative and Financial Manual. Specifically, the Foley Ethics Commission recommendation specified allowing hiring of family members if a legislator was disabled. I want to point out that this does not in any way personally affect me, as I already have my caregiver with me. But what about the next new legislator, or even a senior legislator who is disabled in our aging House body? We saw an example last year with our friend Mark Nakashima. What about any of you when you get older? The rule change request was rejected in favor of verbiage of discretionary power for hiring that actually already existed. It is important to remember that the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, also the ADAAA, and State HRS 368-1.5 all ban discrimination in all state facilities, including in this building. 28% of our population have a disability. 14% are mobility disabled like me, and half of those are kupuna. Many of you yourselves are now kupuna or care for kupuna. For over 2 years, I've seen the majority of my own disability accommodation requests ignored, but my reservations about this single rule request are not about me. And I do also want to thank our Sergeant at Arms for his help today with a hands-free microphone installation and his assistance yesterday as serving as my left hand. I urge you to consider the addition of the rule I specified, as well as fully supporting existing federal and new and state laws, and yes, even rules that stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. whether they are your colleagues, your family, or a stranger on the street. Mahalo.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Representative Peruso.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support, but with reservations.
Proceed.
I would like to first enter the comments from the Chair of Judiciary into the record as if they were my own, in large part because I echo his sentiments of gratitude around the work that has been done on these rules. However, I cannot fully support these rules as currently articulated because they incorporate so few of the recommendations coming from both community and colleagues that I think would create a more transparent, accountable, and fair processes of policymaking. In particular, I'd like to see us build more language into the rules supporting budget and finance transparency, including the adoption of fiscal notes, institutionalize explicit and frequent discussion of the state's financial plan, and more careful attention to the referral process, especially around the distinction between fiscal and non-fiscal matters. But I am not a no. I am voting yes with reservations, and that yes is really strong in large part because of your process and your inclusivity. I trust that this leadership team's commitment in 3 areas will be realized. Number 1, the commitment to build capacity and consensus within the body so that we can move towards more open and transparent processes over the course of the biennium. Number 2, to revisit the issue of public notice for specific committees in Rule 20 over the next couple of weeks. Number 3, to pilot work around earlier access to testimony for committee members and community in this session. My community understands that long-lasting positive change requires trust building, a collaborative approach, and consensus building. And I know that we are all here for this work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Representative Souza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with strong reservations, and I would like to insert the words of the representative from Makiki into the record as my own.
So ordered.
Thank you. I agree with her analysis of proposed Rule 20 related to open committee meetings. There should have been a public hearing relative to the advisory committee on the rules. We need to increase transparency at every juncture here in the House, and the people of the state of Hawaii expect that of this body. The House rules, although considered our internal policies, have tremendous reach and impact on the public in its execution. In addition, I feel there are no impactful substantive changes that elevate the public's confidence in this body. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Transparency is the foundation of good governance. It ensures accountability, builds public trust, and strengthens our democracy by keeping the lines of communication between government and the people we serve open and clear. As legislators, we carry the responsibility of representing our constituents fairly and effectively, and transparency is what allows us to uphold that trust. Madam Speaker, I support the proposed reforms before us today because they are a step in the right direction. These reforms reflect this body's commitment to improving how we conduct the people's business. They aim to make our processes more accessible, our decisions more understandable, and our actions more accountable. However, it is crucial to remember this. These rules are a floor, not a ceiling. They establish a foundation, but they should inspire us to go further. Madam Speaker, true transparency does not come solely from the rules we adopt. It comes from the culture we cultivate. For example, committee chairs have significant latitude in how they run their committees. This is not merely a responsibility. This is an opportunity to lead with openness, to encourage meaningful participation, and to ensure that the voices of all stakeholders are heard and respected. As a first-time chair entrusted with your Committee on Higher Education, I fully intend to follow the example of transparency set by your chair of the Committee of Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs and make the most of this opportunity. Madam Speaker, transparency is not always the easiest path. It requires effort, planning, and time. But the benefits far outweigh the costs. By working in the open, we empower our constituents to hold us accountable and invite them to be active participants in shaping the future of Hawaii. Today, I urge us to embrace not just the letter of these reforms, but the spirit behind them. I'm heartened that our leadership team sees these proposed rules as the beginning of a renewed effort, not the conclusion of our work. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, let us all commit to raising the bar, not merely meeting the standards, but exceeding them, to show the people of Hawaii that their House of Representatives is fully dedicated to earning and maintaining their trust. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Matsumoto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I could have the words from the representative from Manoa inserted as if they're my own.
So ordered.
I should have stood up a little bit earlier because he said it exactly as how I would have. But I'd like to add, I've been a member of this body. This will be my 7th term now. And I'll be the first one to say, for the first 10 years, I didn't even know that there was a rules process. It was very quickly done on opening day. I'm sorry, I'm standing in support. It was done on opening day, and it was very quickly done. It was only when I became the minority leader 2 years ago that I was invited to be part of the rules process. Again, it was done very quickly, and I'll say none of the Republican input was taken at that time. This year, I'm very grateful that we opened it to every single member to be able to add their input, and that all of those inputs were considered with the rules. We might argue that it's not perfect, but it is a wonderful starting point. I am so grateful that considerations from both the majority and the minority were taken in on the rules that were voted today. So for those reasons, Madam Speaker, I stand in support. Mahalo.
Any further discussion? Representative Hussey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support with reservation. And the reason for my desire to speak right now is simply to memorialize that the work has been tremendous. Thank you for Madam Speaker, Vice Speaker, for providing us a very inclusive process. However, I think it's important to recognize that the work is not complete. There's still important work to be done. The thing in particular that I wanted to raise up is the issue of fiscal notes, which I think we all agree is very important in order for us to do the important financial planning for the state of Hawaii. And what I think about in particular is on this auspicious day, which is the anniversary of the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, there is thousands of people gathered just across the way here at Iolani Palace. Iolani Palace's construction was actually opposed by members of the legislature, by Joseph Navahi in particular, the representative from Puna, because of the concern that it would harm the fiscal stability of the kingdom. And that work which he led in the 19th century still rings true for today. We need to make sure that we run our state as fiscally sound as possible. So thank you very much for your work, Speaker and Vice Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Vice Speaker Ichiyama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support.
Please proceed.
I just like to offer 2 brief comments. And before I proceed, if I could adopt the words of the Majority Caucus Leader as if they were my own.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to share, Speaker, my appreciation for the process that you allowed the Advisory Rules Committee to undertake this past session. I think we've heard many times in speeches from prior members that this was the first time that they felt it was so inclusive and open. And so thank you for allowing us to have that dialogue and opportunity. And I just wanted to emphasize, I hear the concerns about the Advisory Committee on Rules, and I just wanted to emphasize that it is advisory. It makes recommendations. Some of the work of the committee is also to vet out proposals and see what is feasible to implement now, or as the Majority Caucus Leader mentioned, some that will take resources and time to implement that we would like to continue to explore. And I think there are a lot of good suggestions that we felt were worth more exploration, but just needed some more time or implementation challenges in order for them to take effect. I also just wanted to mention that the adoption of these rules today on the floor is very important so that we can continue to move forward with our work here as a legislature. Unfortunately, with the calendar the way it is, our bill introduction cutoff is coming up very shortly, and bills will need to be referred to committees. These rules contain updated committee descriptions as well as creation of a new committee on public safety. And I feel it's very important that we move forward with adoption of these rules so that we can refer bills to committees and make sure that those subject matter chairs are able to move forward quickly and address the many concerns and challenges that we know are affecting Hawaii residents today. So for those reasons, I'm in support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Representative Julie Reyes Oda.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support with reservations. I would like to insert the words of the representative from Kalihi as if they were my own. Thank you.
So ordered. Any further discussion? Representative Grandinetti.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support, and I'd like to have the words of the representative from, I rise in support with reservations. And I would like to have the words of the representative from Manoa inserted into the journal as my own, because I really share his sentiment. And I do want to share my appreciation to our new House leadership and the Advisory Committee on the Rules for all of their hard work. I, as a new member, am really grateful to be joining this body at a time where there's a palpable energy of change and openness. I feel it, and I'm really looking forward to this session. I think these rules include very positive and important first steps towards rebuilding public trust and showing that we take the concerns of our constituents seriously. That being said, I don't think they're enough to fully address concerns from our community around transparency and accountability. But I understand that there are valid reasons for this, and I understand that meaningful changes can take time and resources to properly implement. So I'm rising with reservations to show my community that I know the work isn't over, and I'm genuinely very hopeful and optimistic that we'll continue this important conversation under our new House leadership this biennium. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Representative Pirik.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With reservations.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So I'd like to just read one paragraph here from the rules. It's on social media. It says on page 49, section 3, content may not be used to disparage other members, keyword disparage, other individuals or political parties. This includes featuring other members, individuals, or political parties in a way that invites disparaging or threatening comments or reactions, even if the content is presented in a neutral manner. So let's say my colleagues, majority of them vote on a bill that's going to increase taxes, and then I create a social media post saying, look, these members are voting yes on a bill that's going to increase taxes, and that could increase the cost of living for my constituents, and that could actually make it more expensive for you guys to buy groceries, and that could be therefore not a good bill for you guys. So that could be interpreted as disparaging, perhaps based on the definition of disparaging. So I have another document here. This is the House of Representatives Communications Standards Manual from Congress. And check out their definition for disparaging. It says official communications critical of policy may not be personalized or politicized and may not be used to disparage members, other individuals, or political parties. For purposes of this rule, disparage shall include, but not limited to, personal insults, ad hominem attacks, or attacks on personal character. In other words, it would be permissible, from my understanding of the Congress's interpretation of the term disparage, to say on my social media post after we adopt these rules, hey, my colleagues just adopted a policy or passed a bill that's going to raise taxes. That could make it more expensive on you. I don't think that's a bad bill. Excuse me, I don't think that's a good bill. Let's read the next part. Ideological criticism is permitted. This is Congress's definitions of decorum and civility with regards to communication. So with that understanding of the term disparage, and I'm guessing that this social media policy, when it uses the phrase content is presented in a neutral manner, being consistent with Congress, which says ideological criticism is permitted, I can vote yes.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Oh, excuse me. Let me back up. That was a discussion on HR number 6. Any discussion on HR 7? Seeing none, we will take. Do you want to take the vote on both of them at the same time? All those, we're going to be voting on both House Resolution 6 and 7. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say no. The motion is carried. House Resolution number 6 and 7 are adopted. Item number 6, introduction of bills. Representative Morikawa.
Madam Speaker, I move that all bills laying on the clerk's desk pass first reading by title and be referred to print.
Representative Garcia.
Madam Speaker, I second the motion.
All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say no. The motion is carried. Said bills pass first reading. Item number 7, introduction of resolutions. Mr. Clerk, are there any resolutions for action?
There are no resolutions for action. May all others be referred to print.
So ordered. Item number 7, announcements. Members, are there any announcements? Seeing none, if there are no further announcements, I would like to remind the members that on Tuesday, we will convene at 9 a.m. for our regular session, then convene in joint session at 10 a.m. in this chamber for the Governor's State of the State address. Representative Morikawa.
Madam Speaker, I move that this House stand adjourned until 9:00 a.m. Tuesday.
Representative Garcia.
Madam Speaker, I second the motion.
All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say no. The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. Tuesday.